strikes me that Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have yet to tell us how they're going to pay for any of their proposals, which would therefore potentially be inflationary in themselves. How do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, really, that's a great summary of it. I mean, clearly, just from a political perspective, she is really taking aim at the fact that consumers all over the income spectrum, but of course, the lower to middle income has been most impacted by this, the rising and elevated cost of living that's resulted post-pandemic. She's very focused, obviously, on housing, dealing with the high cost of living in housing, with more affordable housing subsidies and things like that, taking a look at stopping price gouging, and obviously helping families with a more elevated child tax credit than what we saw, obviously than what we saw in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from Trump, but then also more elevated child tax credits than the extended tax credits that we saw in the pandemic. So you're right. All of this will have a cost, and she had very few details around how she would fund these types of programs.
Interesting. She did say that she would provide more details as time went on. I'm not sure that Donald Trump plans to do the same. But I spoke earlier today with the campaign's senior economic advisor, Gene Sperling. He's gone from the White House to the campaign, and he talked about these proposals. Let's listen to what he said and have you respond.
I'll be honest, she is announcing more things that go after price gouging and price fixing among corporate landlords and in the food area than President Biden has. He's taken steps, but I think you see that she is not really swerving away, but she is putting her own stamp, and often it means going further and a little tougher.
A little bit tougher here. Do you see sunlight between Kamala Harris and Joe Biden when it comes to their approach to the economy?
Yeah, well, so, I mean, I think that certainly Gene Sperling is right, that a lot of the Harris policies that she talked about today are an extension of what the Biden administration has tried to do. Obviously, antitrust measures, which increase competition in various sectors, has been a really key piece as well of the Biden administration policies. If you get increased competition within markets, you have more players in those markets, it tends to make pricing more fair, and you don't have one or two big corporations that are setting higher prices for all consumers. And that is certainly the case in many rental markets. She mentioned, obviously, the meat packing industry for food. So certainly these types of policies that make markets more efficient, they are very good policies. I think most economists would agree with them. Obviously, she's also talking about various subsidies, though, as well. Yes. Those would be a little bit more costly, and I think there's more questions around how she could implement those.
I want to ask you about the plan for homeowner assistance. You give $25,000 to more than 1 million first-time home buyers as this what they're calling down payment support. What would happen to the housing market? Would it simply raise prices by $25,000 or bring us back to 2007 where some people were in homes that they probably shouldn't own?
Yeah, I mean, there certainly could, I think, so it sounds like from her proposals, that there would be income limits on this type of thing. So for lower income, folks, they could get, some increased subsidies to buy their first homes. So yes, all else equal, this should raise the price of homes. And economists will tell you this will raise the price of housing for everybody. And obviously, depending on how this is structured, it will increase deficits. We talked a lot about this, but there's a really big question around the, quote, pay-fors of all of this. The Biden administration previously has talked about increasing the corporate tax rate, for example. Both Biden and I think Harris has also talked about not raising taxes for anyone or any families that make under $400,000 a year. So that just means that you raise the burden on corporates and others. And so you have to take that into account when you're thinking about these types of policies.
I don't mean to oversimplify this, Tiffany, but I will for the sake of this question. What's more inflationary, the package of proposals you saw today from Kamala Harris or making the Trump tax cuts permanent without paying for them?
Yeah. So we, the CBO and others have estimated that the full extension of Trump tax cuts over the next 10 years could cost $4 to $4.5 trillion. Some of the proposals that Kamala Harris today, all else equal, even go further in terms of expenses than those Trump tax cuts. So it could be more than that. Ultimately, over time, that should raise interest rates, would cost the government even more money in terms of interest costs. And I think just taking a step back, this is coming at a time when, the CBO is already projecting U.S. debt to really reach unprecedented levels. So we're, potentially nearing 200% of GDP debt by 2050, the CBO projects. Wow. So the bottom line is that, either Harris or Trump, in either presidency, the deficit is probably going to be the biggest loser here. And eventually, some policymakers down the road will have to write this course, but it doesn't seem like either candidate now is willing to think about that.
Wow. It's amazing how little we've learned over the last 4 to 8 years, I guess, with trillions added to the deficit here. I'm asking you questions. Tiffany, that's my job. What's your big question? What's the market's big question about these two candidates that has yet to be answered when it comes to the economy?
Well, I do feel like, some of the proposals, we talked a lot about Harris's discussion today, but, obviously the Trump proposals could also have a meaningful impact on the economy and the outlook going forward. The types of tariffs will also raise costs for many Americans that Trump is proposing. It could also really damage, the growth outlook as well. I think that the Trump administration or Trump officials are also talking about, full extension of his Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2025. So again here, I think the real question is, that probably most economists will have is what kind of sort of fiscal sustainability types of measures, are we ever going to think about, obviously, and what are some of maybe the market related triggers that will cause Washington, to start to care about federal government deficits a bit more again.